Hi, and welcome to your Inside Power. My name is Patricia Stepler, and I am going to be your show host today. So what I want you to realize is that we are covering a topic that I started last week on how we build a new model. Our Buckminster Fuller said that, to change something, you don't change it by changing what is existing. To change something, you need to build a new model, which makes the current model or the old model obsolete. So last week in the show, we talked about that model and how we have to change. Today, what I want to do is to give you some ideas of exactly how to go about changing the model and what things you need to consider when you want to have a different result. Because the only way you're going to get a different result is to first change what you're doing and change your actions. So we first have to be aware. So awareness is key. And that's one thing that a lot of times we miss is the awareness factor. But we have to be aware that there's something that's not working right and that we need to change something. And so awareness is always the first thing. Now, when you become aware, then you have to decide, is this a situation that is worth my time and effort to change, or is it not? And that's a decision we have to make. But we first have to become aware that maybe something's not serving us well, and that maybe we need to have some type of a change. So awareness is always key. And then we have to decide. We have to make a decision, because nothing's going to happen unless you make a decision. You can be aware of a situation and say, oh yeah, I need this to be a little different. However, if we do not make a decision, nothing's much is going to happen either. So awareness is key. Make a decision. How are we going to think about it? How are we going to feel about it? And how are we going to act? Because we know that those are all parts of who we are. When we talk about our attitude, it's our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. So we have to see, what are our thoughts, feelings, and actions about this situation? And so we use that to make that decision. So doing new actions in a new way is how you make change. Now, that seems so obvious, like no kidding. If you want something different, you're going to have to do new actions in a new way and get a different result. However, you'd be surprised at how many times we use that definition of insanity of, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Why do we do that? Well, because we don't like to change. By and large, humans do not like to change. Change is difficult. Change confuses our subconscious mind. Change puts our conscious and our subconscious mind in conflict with each other. And when they're in conflict with each other, nothing happens. So that's part of the problem. Now, when you go to start to do these new actions, once you've made that decision, you become aware, you made the decision, now you're going to do some different actions. When you start to do that, one of the things you're going to realize is it's not going to be perfect. And so often we want everything to be perfect before we take a step. You can't wait till everything's perfect. Nothing is ever going to be perfect. So just start. Just make a difference and start. And if you find that you've made that step forward and then things start to move backwards, be aware that that's normal. And don't beat yourself up about it. So you're going to slip back. You're going to have, when we start anything new and we try to build a new model, that old model keeps interfering, and we call those habits. And we keep doing the same habit over and over again. Why do we do that? Well, because it's a habit. I did a quick video on my social media the other day, because I go for a walk in the morning, and as many years as I've been walking, I always go out of my driveway and I turn to my left. Okay. And we were talking about it. My husband and I were talking about, well, why do we go to the left when we go? Because that's the way I've always done it. And so one day we decided, let's go the other direction. So we went to the right. And when we went to the right, it was so weird because it just felt like we were going the wrong direction. Now, the same path, we covered the exact same path. We just went right around the circle instead of going left around the circle, but it was the same neighborhood, the same everything. But of course, the houses were looking different because instead of seeing the front of some houses, we were starting to see the back of the houses. Instead of being on one side of the road, we were on the other side of the road. And so it just felt different and it felt wrong. So what happened the next day? We came out, we turned left again. Why? Because it was a habit. And so we were about halfway up our street. And I said, why did we go this way? Because we were going to go the other way again. We were just going to keep going to the right until it felt more normal. It was a habit. Now, if something so silly as which direction you turn out of your driveway to go for a walk makes you feel uncomfortable because it just felt wrong and it did feel uncomfortable. Can you imagine what it feels like when you're really changing something of significance? I mean, to me, which direction I go out of my driveway on a walk is rather insignificant. It's very trivial. But when you're changing something to really get a different result, and you've had those ingrained habits for years and years, just imagine how difficult that feels and how uncomfortable that feels if a simple direction on a walk can feel uncomfortable. So what I want you to realize is that don't beat yourself up about it, and understand that sometimes you're going to go the wrong direction and you're going to go back to the way you always did it before. Become aware and just try it again. So what we need to do is to build the vision of what you want, and then think about different scenarios. Pretend like you're writing your own story and you have different events happen or different scenarios happen, and see how the event turns out. And just start playing around with things in your mind until you start to discover what it is that you want to do, and figure out which of those scenarios is the one that you want to go after, but just build these different visions. And then once you have the scenario you want, then what I want you to do is to repeat it over and over and over and over in your mind until it gets very ingrained as to what results you want and what you want to have happen. So we have to first be aware, and then we have to make a decision, because nothing's going to happen until you decide. Just because you're aware of a situation and you want it to change doesn't mean it's going to change until you make a decision to do something different. And then that something different is the actions. So awareness, decisions, and actions. So in the actions, realize it's going to take some time. Think about how long you've done something the other way. I mean, going back to my walk, for me, going for walks, I probably turned left 7, maybe 10 years that I'd be going on these walks. And it always went left. Why did I forget that one day? Because it was a habit. I was so used to going to left, even though we went right one time. Next time we came out, we went left. So keep in mind that it's going to take time, and you're not going to be perfect, and things will go wrong, and that's okay. Just keep trying to build that new model. Now, realize that when we've talked about the mind, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, consciously, you know exactly what you want to do. Subconsciously, it says, no, this is not the way we're going to do this, because the brain is keeping you safe. And this just gets back into how the brain works for you. And the brain's job is to make sure that you are surviving. So it's for survival, and it's keeping you safe. So even though you want to do something different, the subconscious mind's like, no, that's not the way we do it. And so it wants to keep you safe. So just realize you're going to be constantly fighting your own subconscious mind. And it's the stories that we tell ourselves that can really become part of the problem. I want you to think, in the next week about a story that you've told yourself of what happened in the past, and then retell that story. Let me give you an example. Back when I was almost turning 9, my dad was very ill, and he decided he could have surgery either Tuesday or Thursday. Thursday was my birthday. I'm sorry. Yes, Tuesday was my birthday. And he could choose Tuesday or Thursday. He chose Tuesday. And for years, it always bothered me. Like, why did he choose to have a surgery on my birthday? Why didn't he wait until Thursday, which was after my birthday, so he could celebrate my birthday with me? And for years, I sort of told myself a story that he didn't care that it was my birthday. It didn't matter to him. And then here's the worst part. So after he had this surgery, his surgery was about an hour away from our home. And so my one set of grandparents was staying with my brother and I, and my other set of grandparents, they met us, at the town where this surgery was happening. And so that I could see my mom on my birthday and so on. And then they decided to allow me to go in to see my dad. Well, my dad had all these tubes, and he looked awful. There were so many machines, trying to do things for him. And I remember him looking at me, and I probably looked very frightened as a 9-year-old child, seeing your father like that. It's pretty scary. And I remember him looking up at me and saying, "I look pretty bad, don't I?" And I'm like, "Yeah, what are you going to say?" I did not like that. And for years, I think that kept me, and to this day, I just don't like going to hospitals and seeing people that are ill. And it impacts you, and you don't realize the impact. But here's my point. The story that I told myself for years was my dad did not care that surgery was on my birthday. But I never asked him. Why'd you have that surgery? And maybe he chose to have it on my birthday was because he wanted me to see him, that he was still going to be okay. Instead of having a celebration on my birthday with my thinking it'd be the last one we'd have. So you see, you just don't know, what stories are you telling yourself that may not be true, may not be, what really happened. The other stories we tell ourselves bring in those limiting beliefs. We have a situation and something happens, and we maybe didn't succeed at something. And so then we keep repeating that story over and over again. I had a friend, and when I was a teacher, and she kept, after we both retired from teaching, every time I see her, she'd keep bringing up the same garbage that she had when she was teaching. She wasn't teaching anymore. Let it go. Let it go. But you see, we do that inadvertently. And when that happens, we're impacting and keeping those limiting beliefs alive. Let it go. And say, well, why can't it happen? There's no reason. And so let those stories go. Let that negativity go. Let those habits go. Now, when you change a habit, and it was kind of interesting because the other day I was listening to the story by Jack Canfield when he's talking about the astronauts. I know I've shared this before, but the astronauts when they were thinking of putting men into space, they decided to run an experiment and have them wear these concave goggles that turned everything upside down and backwards. And so when they did that, they had something happen they didn't expect. Along about day 15 to 18, in every one of the astronauts, everything turned around normal. So before, everything was upside down backwards. Now the brain flipped everything around. So when that happened, and they were not expecting that, they decided to run another experiment. So they had some astronauts that would wear those goggles today, like 15 or 18, then take them off. And they had another group that did like they originally did and wear them all the time. And what happened again, about day 15 to 18, everything flipped around. And in the other group, when they got to that and took them off for a day, then I'm sorry, it was later in the week. So like day 20, 22 or something, but they took them off around day 14, 15 and left them off for an entire day and then put them back on. And then it took another, few weeks before things flipped around. Point is, your brain takes time to change a habit. Now, some people will say 21 days. Other people say it's more like 30. Honestly, it's probably closer to 100. If you're really going to change a habit. Why? Because that old habit is so strong, it just pulls you back and it just keeps pulling you back over and over again. So we have to make sure that in order to change that habit, that we actually do something, keep reinforcing the good one that we want. And every time we start to pull back and revert back to that old habit, charge again. So we need to do that. When we say, well, I don't have any willpower. No, those habits are so strong. And so you really do have to think, make a decision, and then every time becoming very aware, and every time you see yourself slipping, change it around. At some point, this is what happens. The fear of not doing it overcomes the fear of changing. And so that fear of not changing becomes so very, very strong that we tend to go to the other side and say, okay, this is it. I'm done. I am so tired of things the way they are. I'm changing. That's it. And sometimes we have to get to that point. And I don't know why. It's just the way it works out. But what if we could start looking at the possibilities? What could be possible if I just move forward? Where, what is possible? What can I do? And so what I can't do? What limiting belief do I have that's holding me back? Well, what if that wasn't there? What if my new belief was something different? Let's say maybe you've always wanted a certain job or you want to start a business, but you always told yourself you couldn't do it for this reason or that reason. What if that wasn't true? And you could overcome that. You see, that's what I want you to start looking at. Look for the possibilities and start to look at the new stories you can build for yourself. Visualize what it is that you want. Build the vision. And then align your dreams and your behaviors, your new actions to align with that visualization. And here's what happens. When you start to visualize and you start to really think about what it is that you want to do, you start to attract everything that you want. If you remember, when I talked about the acorn, you have an acorn. You can hold that acorn in your hand all day long and nothing's going to happen. It's just going to stay an acorn. But once you plant it, you make a decision to plant it in the soil and you water it and you fertilize it and you make sure that it's in a place where the sun can help it to grow. when you do that, what happens underneath the soil is everything that acorn needs to break down and to become an oak tree is happening. It's the same way it is with your goals. You plant your goal into your subconscious mind. So you have it in the conscious mind, you get it into the subconscious mind, you plant it, you nourish it. How do you nourish it? Visualizing it. Affirmations, thinking about it, focus on it. And what happens is you start to attract everything you need to you to make that dream a reality. Now, sometimes, this is from experience, sometimes as you're attracting things, you don't realize how they all fit together. And so sometimes you have to step back a minute and say, okay, I get it. This goes, and this goes, and this goes, and this goes. And that's how they all fit together. And then you can start pulling it and start doing the things you need to do to align everything for that perfect goal. And here's what happens when you take the time to do that, and you step back and you say, wait a second, I got to figure this all out. Because one of the things a lot of people miss, quite honestly, is planning time and thinking time. We just, okay, do this, do that. We have these to-do lists and we check things off. Sometimes what we need to do is to stop and think and plan, because that piece is missing. So once you do that and you've got it all together, here's what happens. You've laid all the groundwork. And do you know, you're like a bamboo tree at that point. Do you know that in a bamboo tree, you plant it and you water it and you fertilize it and you cultivate it and nothing happens for, I think it's like 8 years. And then all of a sudden, up comes that bamboo and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. Like practically every day, you can see the difference in how it's growing. That's what happens to you. You plant the seeds, you nurture them, you see how they're all fitting together, you figure it all out, and all of a sudden, boom, and things take off. But here's what happens to a lot of people. Have you ever heard the 3 feet of gold? It's a story in Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, where these miners were looking for gold and they thought they were in this vein of gold and nothing was happening. And they'd invested a lot of money. They had owed a lot of people money because they had invested in them, believing in them, and then they got nothing. And so they sold their equipment to this other person, and this person hired an expert and realized if they had just moved 3 feet, that it hit one of the richest gold areas in the United States. So sometimes we're so close and we stop right before it's time. So I don't want that to be you. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'd love to have a talk with you and to help you to get your breakthrough so that you can get to your goal that you want. It's Patricia Stepler with Your Inside Power. Make it a great day.